Another episode of the Fantasy Reaction. I am your host, Andrew Velez, and I'm here with my co-host, Joel Dehls. Episode 4 of the Fantasy Reaction, and we just watched ourselves what was an ugly game in the first half turn into a very high-scoring offensive game in the second half. How you doing today, Joel? How did you like that football game that we just watched?
I'll tell you what, man. Today was terrible. Two reasons. Number one, special episode because Drew and I are facing off in our main league,
That's a
right?
fact.
So we're in like 1,000 leagues, but there's one league we care about the most. Drew has Jalen Hurts, went off 30 fantasy points. I have AJ Brown, got cucked twice because the first one was a holding penalty. The second one was in his hands. We got the PI, no PI call, should have been PI.
Should have
Not
been.
only that, put a nice little bet in today, little two-legger, something calm. Eagles money line under 56.5. They were in the first half. I'm like, I am chilling. I'm like, should I put money on the Vikings, like just to even it out? And the whole time in the second half, it's just touchdown, 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 touchdown. And that last Vikings touchdown with a minute 30 left that didn't matter, fucked me out of my win. So I've had better days, but now we're doing the fantasy reaction, so I'm happy.
Never, ever like to hear another man losing his money. However, I'll tell you what, I was happy like a pig in shit when that AJ Brown touchdown got called back.
On top of that, I sat Hawkinson. We don't have a tight end, but in flex.
That's a fact. That one I don't feel too bad about. But last episode, I should say, we had a special guest with Joel Moran because it was the Jets versus Bills. This week, we have the absolute pleasure of bringing on Mr. River Brown himself.
Here we go.
To talk about his so-called Philadelphia Eagles. Mr. Rivio Foreign, how you doing today?
I was, I just ate. I was watching the game. A lot of ups and downs, but I'm excited that we grudged out another win. I got some things I want to talk to Dehls about, man, because that shit looked nasty. That shit looked real nasty. But overall, had a good day at work, and I'm excited to be here, man.
I'm happy to hear that, Riv. So let's get right into it. We just watched this game, 34-28. The Philadelphia Eagles do defeat the Minnesota Vikings. We had a feeling that this was going to be an offensive game, but with the pressure that Kirk Cousins saw, he showed me the most out of anyone else on this field. The pocket presence, the sheer toughness that he plays with, to go off for 4 touchdowns, 364 yards, to have 125.6 passer rating. He was the true star of the game today. But Riv, talk to me. What do you want to get off your chest? What is it that you want to target Mr. Dehls for?
Oh no, not like specifically target, but Hurts, man. I don't know what the fuck's going on, man. He's looking real. He's lacking confidence. It seems like maybe lacking confidence in the playbook or confidence in his ability to just throw the ball, make plays down the field. But just to talk about Kirk Cousins for a little bit, because you mentioned it, he was amazing today. Like he was elite. Making timely throws, making throws out the pocket. Evading sacks. He did what he can with a 3rd string, 4th string offensive line. He didn't have much help. Osborne was dropping passes. Madison was fumbling the ball. It was just a lot of bad shit going on for the Vikings that made you think like they had no chance of winning this game. And Kirk and Jettas, they put on a clinic, did the things they did. I mean, Jettas, he made some catches where you like, how did he even get that? Slay was playing amazing defense, best receiver in the league. I keep trying to explain it to people, but they don't want to listen. But Kirk was he, like you said, that Drew, he showed a lot today. Like even though they lost, Kirk showed that, with all that, everything back against the wall, pressures on him, he can do some things. So shout out to Kirk.
So Joel, my question to you is, are you feeling nervous about this Philadelphia Eagles offense? The defense, I feel like that's going to come with some time. They're playing a very high-powered offense in terms of talent. The offensive line, definitely, they were able to have their way. But are you feeling a type of way about this Philadelphia Eagles offense?
First of all, I see D Mills said he was in here. I don't know if that's the real D Mills or not. If it is,
D Millie in the cut.
If not, you caught us. Listen, Jalen Hurts right now, the passing game isn't clicking. That's obvious. Like end of game stats, 18 for 23. Like, oh, he was accurate. But even on the pass, he was accurate. Like that deep ball to Smitty, that was underthrown pretty significantly. Smitty had to come back and really Moss, obviously the second deep ball, the touchdown to Smitty was right on the money, but he was wide open, pressure in his face. That was probably his best throw of the night. But so far, the passing game looks off. Jalen Hurts doesn't look whatever he's reading on the field doesn't look like he trusts, because he has time in the pocket, but most of the time he's scrambling out of the pocket, either trying to extend plays or just rushing the ball and picking up 4 or 5 yards and kind of keeping the chains moving. The good thing for the Eagles is that they are arguably, or maybe not even arguably, the best rushing offense in the NFL. I mean, you just put DeAndre Swift in, he has 170 total yards. So they could always fall back on being a dominant rushing team with an elite offensive line, and that's going to win you at minimum 10 games in the NFC. I look at their upcoming games: Tampa Bay, Washington, the Rams, the Jets. Their real first test, they'll get tested against the Jets, but offensively, it's going to be hard to keep up. Miami week 6, that's going to be a real test that by that time, I'm expecting that offense to be like what we saw last year. Of course, you don't have Jalen Hurts playing in the preseason. Shane Steichen is no longer there. So maybe we should have expected some growing pains. And even with the growing pains, they're 2-0. So they're not playing their best football, but you got to be happy with the record. You got to be happy with the rushing game looks like. And I still have faith that Jalen Hurts in this offense with these weapons and the offensive line, it'll come around at some point.
Yeah, in that first quarter, it really did look sloppy on both sides of the ball on both sides in terms of Eagles and the Vikings. But speaking on the Eagles, what was going on with that offense in that first quarter? They figured it out with that in that second quarter. They said, hey, we have to stick to what is our bread and butter. We are still one of the best rushing teams in the National Football League. The push that our offensive line gets is very few teams in the league have that luxury. They go 7 plays in a row on that scoring drive. They go rush the ball 7 times in a row with DeAndre Swift. Like Joel already mentioned, he rushed for over 170 yards today. I believe it was on 28 carries. So they gave him a ton of opportunity today. Opportunity that he most definitely did not see last week, against the New England Patriots, where I believe he only had 1 touch or one target at all, which was in the passing game that he did not bring in. But I'm with you. Hurts does not look himself passing the football, but maybe they did need to get back to their roots, understand of, hey, let's run the ball a little bit. Let's open up the passing game. We saw that happened in the third quarter as well, that the defense starts going all out to sell out on the rush. They go have that big touchdown to Smitty over the top for 63 yards. But one thing that did catch my attention, of course, when you're up 2 touchdowns, you're not expecting there to be turmoil on the offensive side on the sidelines, but with the offensive personnel on the sideline. But seeing A.J. Brown kind of show off that he was not happy by any means. When you're up 2 touchdowns, I get it. You only saw the ball 4 times at that point in time during the game, but are you really going out of your way to make a statement on how you're not getting the ball when your team's up 2 touchdowns? In my opinion, there's bigger fish to fry. You're already winning the ball game. Sure, you want to clean up some things. That's evident. Jalen Hurts in that first half definitely didn't look clean. Really, throughout the entirety of the game, wasn't his cleanest game. Looked a little bit slow. I don't know if that's just me. It seemed as if he didn't have that same burst, kind of second-guessing his decisions, kind of instead of going to the sideline early in the game, kind of cut back towards the middle of the field, just trying to do a little bit too much. He just did not seem himself, to the point where me and my brother are having conversation whether or not Jalen Hurts was quietly injured during the preseason. It really caught my attention like that, where he just does not look, we know Jalen Hurts is a freak athlete. He didn't seem like that athlete that we saw all last season. But again, even still with that being said, they're able to put up 34 points. This offense, even at its worst, is still one of the best offenses in the game. We understood that this Vikings defense was not going to be one to really hold the Vikings for the entirety of the game. They really did a sound job in the first half, only allowing 13 points. But that also came with a bunch of turnovers on the Viking side, and them giving the Eagles flipping field position and giving them really good field position for the Eagles to not really score touchdowns, to get those early field goals. But they really figured it out in the second half, realizing, hey, we're the best, one of the best rushing teams in the National Football League. Let's stick to our strengths.
It's 2 things that you guys said that you kind of put together. Dehls talked about how he seems like he's second guessing or not trusting his reads. And then you mentioned A.J. Brown on the sideline complaining. That could be a combination of things of Jalen Hurts just not trusting what he sees out there, because like you mentioned it, the Vikings secondary is not good. The Vikings defense in general is not good. So for this team to struggle against the secondary for the majority of the game, not really find his rhythm. Hurts not like what he sees out there. That's concerning to me because we played the Patriots, who's a pretty good defense. Then we come play the Vikings, who's not a good defense. And it seems like it's still the same hesitation. It's still the same, like the lack of passing offense is not there. I mean, Smitty had 2 big plays. Like you mentioned it, the first one, he had to kind of stop, go get it. The second one was a beautiful ball. But for the most part, I think like even the interception Hurts threw, it was just uncharacteristic because it was like you kind of threw it to the Vikings defender, or he kind of like he just kind of let him read him way
And
too
to be honest, on that play too, he had AJ Brown over the top. He just decided to see the crosser instead of letting that play develop. That was definitely not a smart
Yeah,
decision.
he's not, and it's like even the runs, he's like hesitating, so he doesn't have the same burst. So he's kind of not running as fast as he wants. Like it's just a lot of hesitation and not a lot of like 100% full dedication to this offense. It looks like, and like Dehls mentioned, we got a couple weeks to play mediocre teams or teams that are not on our level, so we can able to get the rust off. The Jets, that defense, that's our real test against an elite defense again. So offensively, they won't be able to do much, but defensively, that's going to be a test for our boys. But I do think like this game, it bothers me a little bit because offensively, we have the best, offensive line in the league. So Swift, Penny had a couple good plays. Scott had a couple good plays when he got in. Like no matter who's in there, the run game is going to be there. But we do need at some point to get AJ Brown in, to get Smitty. We got him in today. Like we need to get these guys going. Dallas, we got to get him going because these are our key weapons. And Hurts, he's a great passer, so he has to continue to grow and elevate his game. But this is something like this game, we won. We're playing at like a C+ level, so we're 2-0. You got to feel good about that. But you still want to see, pain. Like you still want to see this team elevate because we play the Commanders soon, and that defensive line is a scary team. So you got to look at the bads and kind of get better in training, not training camp, in practice.
And to talk about the Vikings, because I see some of the comments, if you're a Vikings fan, starting off 0-2 isn't great. Only 11% of teams who are 0-2 end up making the playoffs. And even though their defense on paper isn't great, this is also an offense that turned the ball over 4 times and wasn't putting their defense into great spots. So honestly, I think for what the defense, the position it was put in, I think they did okay. Of course, when you give up 30+ points, that's never ideal. But when you have 4 turnovers, it's hard for really any defense, no matter how elite you are, to consistently get stops. So you had 4 turnovers in this game. You had 3 turnovers in last game. And if you're a Vikings fan, you're kind of sitting here saying, damn, like if we just don't turn the ball over, we might be 2-0. So we're talking a lot about the Eagles. But I don't want to just bury the Vikings yet, because offensively, we always knew they were going to be this way. We knew that they were going to have explosive plays. I don't love what I'm seeing from the running game. Alexander Mattison so far has not been very efficient. This game, he was damn near non-existent. I don't love that. Of course, you lose Dalvin Cook, who wasn't really his normal self last season, but you were expecting Mattison with some fresher legs to at least be, average 4 yards per carry. He hasn't quite got there. But it's really the defense who you held the Bucs to 21 points while having 3 turnovers. That's a win, regardless of what we think about the Bucs. The fact that you're holding them to 3 touchdowns is a win. So I don't want to. Of course, the Eagles is probably the lead here because they're the better team. They're the team that we think could go on a Super Bowl run. But even though the Vikings are 0-2, I don't think they're a bad 0-2, right? You could be 0-2 and feel good about yourself. You could be 2-0 like the Eagles right now and be like, we're 2-0, but if we don't get this going, we're not going to be able to beat Dallas. We're not going to be able to beat San Francisco. So Vikings fans, take a deep breath. I do think brighter days are ahead.
I don't disagree at all. Understanding that the Vikings were playing with a backup offensive line. Essentially, that was the case tonight. And you still had Jettas be Jet. You saw Hawkinson really get involved, have 2 touchdowns. He was a huge part of this game. Jordan Addison continues to show why they used that first-round pick on him. 2 touchdowns in the first 2 games of his NFL career. He shows that he can be special. If you're a Minnesota Viking fans, there are things to be happy about. There are things to be upset about. Your rush defense needs to be cleaned up. You did well against Rachaad White, but it was a different beast tonight with, of course, this Philadelphia Eagles and DeAndre Swift. But let's take a moment before we really get back to the Vikings. DeAndre Swift, there's a certain someone that we keep having conversations back and forth that seemed like all offseason where, he's an EPA merchant. I'm talking about Joel Moran. He loves EPA.
EPA merchant.
But it just so happened that EPA does not matter to him when we're having conversations about DeAndre Swift, who was the leader in rush EPA last season. So for him to come out tonight with the true opportunity that we know that he deserves. Kenny Gainwell is a fine ball player in his own right, but we're talking about DeAndre Swift, who we know has versatility in his game. The issue is that he lacked vision tonight. That was not the issue. Sure, the holes were there, but he had an offensive line, a great one over there in Detroit. It's just a matter of now you're in Philadelphia. Now there's a little bit more cohesiveness in an offense, and it's really more refined to the rush offense. And Swift took full advantage today. He looked like the star that we had thought that he could have been over in Detroit. But to get back to Minnesota, I definitely love what I saw with their offense today, especially when they were facing what seemed like pressure every single time. The play action pass definitely boded very well for the Minnesota Vikings. And I asked this question to you, Riv. Who will get to 2,000 first? Jettas or Tyreek? Because my goodness gracious,
Tyreek got the little edge right now.
What we saw from Jet tonight, and I tweeted this, and it's still 100% fact. Last time the two matched up, friend of the show, Big Play Slay, he got the best of Jettas. Tonight, I can't say that was the story. In fact, it was the complete opposite. Jettas was dominant. And you mentioned it. Slay played some good defense. He had some plays where he was right on Jettas' hip. Yeah. Jettas just was on some other shit tonight.
There was this one play, and shout out to Kirk, because Kirk threw some dimes. Where Slay he had Slay on the slant, and Slay played it perfectly. Somehow, some way, Jettas just ripped the ball right out of Slay's hand, caught it for the first down. Who gets to well, first of all, I think DeAndre Swift heard me because I did call him trash.
That was you too.
Yeah, I was like, I got 3 touches.
Yeah. I know. I never said I didn't say he was trash all off season. That's been the EPA merchant for sure. But I did say, like, last game he was losing me. But this game, listen, Philly is offensive lineman U. They build up often. Like Landon is another one. He's another elite guy coming in offensive line. He's another one that's going to be brought up like Lane Johnson, like them boys. Like he's another one. The offensive line was just beautiful. But who gets to 2K first? I think Tyreek is more.
Does it happen? Does it happen? One. Do you think it happens?
I think one of them it'd be fire if both. I'll be honest. It'd be fire if both of them get it. Unfortunately, that's hard to predict, but I think I think Reek is more prone to those big 200-yard games, but I think Jettas is more consistent with his 110s, 120s, 130s. I think Jettas is great in the intermediate with the short routes, then the deep routes. Tyreek is good for those big. He gonna have a couple 150, 180, maybe another 200, but I think if I had to pick one, I'm always picking my guy Jettas to get 2,000.
Is there a tier break? I was talking about this. I was at Bonds earlier. Is there a tier break between Jettas and Tyreek and the rest of the league, or is Tay still up there? Cup, Chase, are they in the same tier as those guys?
In my opinion, I think it's Jettas, Reek, Tay. I think that's the tier. Like I think you can never.
Reek, Tay.
Yeah, I think you can never take Tay out because he's still one of the best receivers in football. The route running, the separate. Like everybody looks up to him. Like it's like LeBron. Like not saying he's LeBron like stature, but like everybody always gonna keep his name in it. And then the next tier is like Chase, Diggs, Cup. You can even try to throw AJ Brown in there. Like I think that tier one though, like Hill and Jettas are just they just separate from everybody else. It's tough. Like outside of Tay, it's tough to really argue. Like you could argue Cooper Kupp because of that year, but I think like there's still like Jettas and Hill are still a step above those guys.
Tay deserves that acknowledgement. I can't leave Cup out. I get it. He hasn't been available this essentially season because he missed a good portion of last year. Hasn't started the year off so far. He's going to miss the first 4 weeks. But what he showed me, the best wide receiver season of all time. You need to put his name in there. And Jamar Chase is another one that I feel like that's the 5. It's Tay, it's Cup, it's Chase, it's Hill, and his Jet for sure. But I get if you want to lock those two up because just the volume that they receive, how much attention the two draw, how dynamic the two of them are. I understand where you're coming from.
I don't
look
with Chase. I don't put Chase. Oh, I don't put Chase.
Good, bro.
Yeah, I don't put Chase definitively in it because I think him and Diggs are always they're like a conversation. Like that fit spot.
No,
Yeah,
no.
like
Rookie
Diggs.
season, 1,400 yards.
Diggs is different. He's like it's just hard to just like Diggs is nice. Like he's
Chase
really
missed 5 games, still put up over
Chase,
1,000. Come
but
on.
Diggs' separation, his footwork, like his route running,
Chase is the
he's
same thing. It's the same thing, and he's more explosive.
who
Chase
more explosive than who? Diggs?
than Diggs.
He's more athletically gifted.
Diggs has a comfortable gap in route running, I think.
Okay.
He does.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
he's up there with one
He's
of the
got better
ones.
hands.
He does.
Someone in the comment section just mentioned Terry. Why is it whenever we talk about
I don't
top
know.
5,
I'll
people
be
got to
honest,
bring up Terry?
Terry's not
McLaurin?
better than CeeDee Lamb, so he's
No.
not in this conversation.
No, people love Terry. I'm looking at the Vikings' upcoming schedule because we said the Eagles, upcoming Tampa Bay, Washington, Rams looked okay. The Vikings is tough. They got the Chargers, Carolina, which is okay, but Kansas City, Chicago, and San Francisco. I mean, they got to get through week 7. I think you got to get to 3 wins at least. I don't know how the Chargers, Carolina, Chicago, those are 3 games because Kansas City and San Francisco, they're home for both of them, thankfully. But I know I might have said brighter days are ahead. You really need that week 1 win over Tampa Bay because the fact that you have to play 3 of the best teams in football in Philly, which you just lost to Kansas City and San Francisco in the first 7 weeks, it almost feels like every other game outside of that becomes must win at this point. I have faith in them because whatever team they go up against going forward, outside of maybe San Fran, I don't think is going to rush for 200 plus yards. And really, Philly did not have to throw the ball at all, if we're being honest. There was a point in the game where they're going on 15-play drives. And normally for a lot of teams, you go on a 15-play drive, that's not sustainable. But for Philly, who can overcome plays where it's like either negative yards or you have a holding penalty and it's 1st and 20, Philly's able to overcome that. A lot of run-heavy teams aren't able to overcome that because they usually don't have a passer or weapons as gifted as the Eagles do. So I still think that going forward, the Vikings are going to be okay. But looking at this schedule, it's going to be hard to get to the amount of wins you're going to need to get to make the playoffs and really go into a run. Thankfully, the second half of the year, you get some Green Bays, Atlantas, New Orleans, Denver, Chicago again, Vegas. So it lightens up after week 7. But you really need to win those games outside of San Francisco or Kansas City if you want a shot in December to get into the playoffs.
No, I'm with you. And the idea was that the NFC was going to be weaker. And last season, we saw the Vikings have a 13-win season. I don't think that we were expecting them to start off the season 0-2, especially going up against the Buccaneers at home. Riv, last question, and then we're going to get you out of here. Who is the wide receiver 1 for those Eagles? It was brought to my attention that you believe that
Smitty's better.
That Smitty could be the wide receiver 1 for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Who told you that? Who told you I said that?
Listen, man, there's just people, there's rumors, there's allegations. What's your opinion on that? It's not the craziest thing I ever heard.
I think Smitty's my favorite Eagle. So him being my favorite, his aura,
no doubt.
Listen,
it's there.
A lot of people just love stats, but you need that aura next to that stat.
Philly might lead the league in aura.
Yeah, no, the aura over there is insane. I do think like AJ Brown is, Yak, he's better, I think. Deep ball, I think he's a little bit better contested. But I think as a route runner, I think Smitty's hands are right there with AJ. Like,
for sure.
Smitty has, we forget, he has probably the greatest college wide receiver year ever. And I think what people forget about Smitty is he can easily be a number 1 on 80% of teams in the NFL. He's just taking a bit of a back seat, but that's because AJ Brown, last year he got a lot of the targets. But we're seeing earlier on this year, Smitty has 3 touchdowns. This year he had the big plays. I think Smitty gets swept under the rug when you talk about his class and Jalen Waddle and all them boys. But I think Smitty has a legit shot to surpass AJ Brown, because I think when you have the route running and the deep ball threat, when you're an elite route runner and you have that deep ball threat and you have elite hands, it's really hard to, put you you in an elite category. So I think Smitty, I think he'll be better. Maybe not this year, but I think next year over the years, Smitty's going to emerge as a number 1, the top 6, 7 receiver in the NFL because he has that type of potential.
I think it might be closer to 1A, 1B this year. Last year, AJ had him clear in yards, touchdowns, 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns. I think week to week, we're going to see them maybe closer to the same level.
All right, Mr. Foreign, is there anything you want to say before you get out of here?
Oh, man. Shout out to my brothers, man.
We're recording tomorrow? Reaction. We're doing a full pod tomorrow? Are we recording tomorrow?
I don't know. That's a TBD.
Okay. TBD.
That's a great question. Just shout out to you guys doing what y'all do. Shout out to Pick a Side, of course. Shout out to the Joel Moran Show. And then
Rev Academy.
Hey,
coming
Riv Academy
soon.
2025. We're here.
I need a
listen,
team.
listen. I promise it's gonna come out in October. I'm telling you right
Whoa,
here.
we got the announcement.
Lock it.
On the
Lock
fantasy
it.
reaction, I'm telling you, I promise on my soul, on my son's life, it is gonna come out in October. You're just not gonna get a date.
Pray for RJ.
I'm
Just
telling
not
for
getting a
RJ.
date. Oh my god.
It's gonna
It's
come in
gonna
October 2023. Just to help you
All
guys
right.
out.
All right.
Just to help
All
you
right,
guys
Mr.
out.
Foreign. We appreciate you. All right, go
Appreciate
get
you,
out
bro.
of here. All right, Mr. Dehls, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's get into the fantasy portion of the show. We can talk about the fantasy side of this Eagles Vikings real quick before we get into our starts and sits. Talk to me, fantasy football related. Are you confident that both of these teams can keep up the offensive output for the rest of the season?
Very. I think the biggest question out of this game is once Gainwell comes back next week, assuming he's back, it seemed like he was kind of close, even though he didn't practice.
With the
Who's
rib
the
injury.
who's the leading rusher for Philly going forward? DeAndre Swift just had legitimately might be his best game of his career. 28 attempts for 175 yards and a touchdown. Didn't do much through the air. But going forward, would you put your money on Swift or Gainwell to lead this backfield?
My thought process is that I don't think Kenny Gainwell has the body type to have a type of game the way that we just saw DeAndre Swift has. I don't think Kenny Gainwell has the body type to have 28 attempts. He's just not the athlete that DeAndre Swift is. And I get that we've seen DeAndre Swift get injured in the past, and the same could be said for him. But the body type, he has that to be the bell cow, the workhorse in the backfield for the Philadelphia Eagles. I just firmly believe that where Kenny Gainwell is talented himself, DeAndre Swift is better.
I agree. I think Swift, what Gainwell does, like coming out of college, he was kind of almost a poor man Swift. Like he's smaller than him. He could be used in the passing game. He could be used in the rushing game. I think Swift just has more talent. And like you said, he's just a larger back. So I would be putting my money on DeAndre Swift going forward. Outside of that, I think it's a lot of what we know. Even though Hurts didn't have a great day, fantasy-wise, he was fantastic. Kirk is going to continue to put up great numbers, 360 and 4 touchdowns. Addison is a flex play at this point. I think that's pretty comfortable going forward. Strong one. TJ Hawkinson had 2 touchdowns. That was big. Goddard, 6 receptions, but 22 yards. His passing game just isn't quite there yet. I think the only other questions I have on these two teams, Alexander Mattison, going forward, I mean, a lot of people draft him as the running back too, maybe a flex play. But going forward, we really haven't seen the efficiency there. He got a touchdown in week 1. Are you still confident in him as an RB2, or have what you've seen these first 2 weeks kind of bumped him down?
2 tough matchups to start the season if you're Alexander Mattison. On top of it, the offensive line has been banged up. Going against Tampa Bay, they've been known notoriously for being a solid rush defense. Vita Vea, Devin White, they had their way. And then tonight, with the Eagles' defensive line, Jordan Carter has been great. Jordan Davis has been great. The pressure that they were getting, beating up that interior offensive line. I think better days are to come from Alexander Mattison. I think he showed a few flashes tonight, just being able to make a defender miss, get open in some space, make some things happen where it was limited. Of course, there were some times where you looked at Madison and say, all right, this is the guy that we thought that this is who I drafted to be my RB2, my at worst RB3. So I still believe in him. I think that, yes, two rough goes to start the season, but overall, I still am going to hold on and believe.
All right, let's get into our starts of the week. You want to go first or want me to kick it off?
You know what? You could go ahead and get us going, man.
All right, so you guys know what we do here. We're giving you a start of the week. We're giving you a sit of the week. Starting off with quarterbacks. There's some players who, like, coming out of their draft, they kind of get labeled a specific thing, and people kind of always hold them to it, whether it's good or bad. I think that happened with Mac Jones, who's my start of the week. Coming out of Bama, it was always like, we know exactly what Mac Jones is. He's never going to have this top 5 ceiling, but he's never going to have a bottom 5 floor. And a lot of people took that negatively when I don't think they should have. His rookie year, quarterback 18, multiple games of 20-plus points. You could pretty much trust him for a QB2. And then his sophomore year last season, we've been talking about it all year. The offensive situation in the coaching room with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia is about as bad as it's going to get in the NFL. Those two guys throughout their entire career have been special teams and defensive type coaches. And for whatever reason, Bill Belichick said, you're going to handle the offense. Thankfully, that only lasted 1 year. Now we have Bill O'Brien. Last week against Philly, 54 pass attempts, completed 65% of those, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, QB2 on the week. Now, they were in comeback mode this entire game. Philly went up 16-0 early, so they were passing the ball a ton. So I don't know if he's going to get to 50-plus attempts. That seems like a ton. But the good news is he's going up against Miami. And Miami is probably going to be the best team to go up against for fantasy because their defense is beatable, but their offense is almost guaranteed to score 30-plus points a game. So even if you don't have a great offensive situation like New England, they're going to be forced to throw the ball because we know Tua in that offense is going to score. It's just a matter of can New England keep up with them. So even though maybe they're not coming back this full game like they were against Philly, I think they're just going to be forced to throw the ball because I don't trust New England to stop Miami defensively.
That was definitely one of my considerations for start of the week. Mac Jones put up a light show against the Eagles, and maybe we have to start taking note of that. Whoever's going against the Eagles at quarterback, maybe they're going to be in play. We saw back-to-back weeks now. Mac Jones put on the light show. Kirk Cousins, who's obviously a talented quarterback, obviously just put on an amazing performance, but definitely one of those guys that was in consideration for me. But my start of the week, Daniel Jones, and this could be a slippery slope, but you know what? I stand 10 toes with my boy DJ. He was horrendous last week. He had 15 completions, 28 attempts for 104 yards, 2 INTs, where he did try and make his name a little bit better, clean up his name, 13 attempts for 43 yards, and that was really early on in the game that he was being efficient as a rusher. As the game progressed, it got worse and worse and worse for the New York Giants and Daniel Jones. Here's the issue. The Giants' offensive line is not good. We understand that. We know that he was sacked 7 times. He was pressured on, what did you tell me, almost 70%?
66, yeah.
Yes, 66%. Here's the silver lining. He's going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who are one of the worst teams in the National Football League, one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. Put on a better performance against the Washington Commanders than what I, and I'm sure most, had expected. But regardless of that fact, the Giants know they need to bounce back, and that starts with Daniel Jones. It's already been reported that Darren Waller, who's been going through some injuries, that hamstring has re-aggravated and it's going to be lingering. It's already come out saying that he will be playing this Sunday against the Arizona Cardinals. I'm expecting, whether it's in the pass, whether it's in the run, DJ will be one of the best plays this week. He has to. The Giants need this one, and I think that it does start with Daniel Jones.
I love that start. I also think Darren Waller, it's scary for sure. He also said that it's nothing compared to the injury he dealt with last year, which is a good thing.
Thank God.
Of course, he missed a ton of games last year, so I would expect that. But hopefully he's able to stay healthy. My quarterback sit, Dak Prescott. There's going to be some games where we're going to be talking about Dak as our start of the week, where he's going to be a top 10 quarterback. But this week going up against the Jets, I think he's a QB2 at best. This is the lowest over-under of the week at 38.5 points. So not even Vegas is expecting a lot of scoring. And offensive line issues for Dallas continue to pile up. Zach Martin just popped up on the injury report. You have Tyler Smith, who missed practice Wednesday and Thursday, I want to say. On top of that, you have Brandon Cooks dealing with an MCL sprain, who's going to miss multiple weeks, it sounds like. So right now it's CeeDee Lamb as the only real receiving threat on the outside. And Michael Gallup, who kind of has turned into this wide receiver 3-4-ish post ACL injury. Of course, you have Tony Pollard in the backfield, but I'm expecting this Jets defense to look very similar to what it did against Buffalo. Against Buffalo, Josh Allen ended up as QB20 on the week. James Cook was RB29 on 16 touches. Stephon Diggs did his thing. I feel fine about CeeDee Lamb. But outside of that, there was no other players on Buffalo that were fantasy relevant. You still have to start Tony Pollard. You still have to start CeeDee Lamb. If you're in a 2-quarterback league, you probably still have to start Dak Prescott. But if you're in a 1-quarterback league, I'm seriously considering starting a Daniel Jones or a Mac Jones, where there's going to be more points scored and you're going up against a defense that isn't the New York Jets. So for this week, I'm lowering expectations for Dak.
Excellent choice. I'm glad that you mentioned that little last part about if you're in a 2-quarterback league, because ironically, like we mentioned early on in the show, Joel and I are matching up in fantasy. And I do have Dak Prescott as my QB2. Unfortunately for my friend Joel over here, I have Jalen Hurts as my quarterback 1. So I'm letting it fly. Dak definitely is not a great starting quarterback 1. I'm acknowledging that. We mentioned it on the Patreon episode. If you missed that, if you're not a Patreon member, go ahead and subscribe to that. It's only $1 to join. You get access to all the episodes that we do weekly. We're doing NFL Pick'ems over there. But I mentioned it on the Pick'ems. I think this is going to be a strong defensive matchup, understanding that Josh Allen, one of the best and the one of the elite quarterbacks, looked horrendous against this Jets defense. Dak Prescott versus the Giants didn't have to do much. That's fair. But fantasy-wise, he was not relevant whatsoever. Understanding that this Jets offense is not great and the defense is going to have to make up for it. I think they're going to I don't want to say overachieve because we know what the Jets defense can be, but they're going to go above and beyond. That's the word that I'm looking for to really lock up Dak Prescott and company. So I don't love that start. No doubt about it. I think that's a great sit. My sit is going to be Mr. Matthew Stafford. Now, I want to preface this. I'm rooting for you, Matty. I'm rooting for the Rams. But this is coming off a week against Seattle where he threw for over 300 yards, no touchdowns, no INTs, took care of the ball, did not get sacked. However, the Niners are a different beast. They got to Kenny Pickett. They made him extremely uncomfortable. They sacked him 5 times, and they forced him to throw 2 terrible throws for 2 interceptions. I'm looking at Matthew Stafford, who's obviously a better quarterback than what Kenny Pickett is, but I am tempering expectations. This Seattle defensive line is not the San Francisco's 49ers defensive line. They are going to get to Matthew Stafford, especially with this Rams offensive line that we had envisioned them coming in to be a weakness. Give them credit for week 1, but week 2, I fear that is going to be a different story. This is just for one of those that are streaming quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford definitely pops up into a lot of people's considerations. I think you wait a week. Respect the San Francisco 49ers, who are arguably not only just the best defense, but also the best team in totality.
You also have Puka Nacua, who showed up in the injury report today, who
That
didn't
shit
practice.
Hurt. That was a punch to the stomach.
Yeah, tomorrow's injury report is going to tell basically everything for Puka. If he doesn't practice again, he's probably not playing. If he's able to get back out there, I feel more confident. Moving on to running backs. So week 1, we had the Thursday night game. We had Lions in Kansas City, and that was our first time seeing kind of this new Detroit backfield with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And kind of ironically, even if you were a Gibbs or a Montgomery owner, you were both kind of happy and upset because Montgomery got a ton of touches, ended up getting touchdown, but you're like, you have 20 plus carries and this is all you gave me. And Gibbs, on the other hand, didn't get a ton of touches, but what you saw from him, you were like, once he gets these touches, he's going to be a top 10, maybe top 5 fantasy running back if he's able to get 50, 60% of the snaps. I think for this upcoming matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, you could just start both of them. I mentioned it on the Patreon episode. This is probably going to be the biggest mismatch between offensive line and defensive line you're going to see in the NFL any given week. We know how great this Detroit Lions offensive line is. And Seattle, we just saw how much they struggled against a Rams offensive line that we were expecting to be one of the worst in the league. So even though there's still questions around how much work does Gibbs get, there's still questions around how efficient will David Montgomery be. I don't think for this matchup either of that matters. I think Gibbs sees more opportunities. I think Montgomery's more effective. It wouldn't surprise me. Both of them got a touchdown last week. Kyron Williams got 2 touchdowns. Cam Akers even got a touchdown. He was the least efficient running back in all of football. He managed to find the end zone. There's no doubt in my mind that this Lions offense can be able to move the ball. So I would start both of these running backs with confidence.
As a fantasy football fan, I would love if your start of the week came into fruition, because we understand the talent that Jahmyr Gibbs has. We just need to see it. We need to see him be given the opportunity. You mentioned it. He had one of the most broken tackles or forced missed tackles that there was in the National Football League. He's a special guy. It's just a matter of giving him the opportunity. I love your start of the week. I'm really hoping that he gets that volume. My start of the week, I have some names, and one is for those that play daily fantasy. It's got to be Derrick Henry. Do whatever you can to get him in your lineups. Interesting. I did see something. Maybe it was just a garbage tweet saying that the Titans may be open to trading Derrick Henry. There was a bunch of teams, the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Miami Dolphins, that would be contenders to get him in a trade. Very interesting. But That matchup versus the Chargers, they let Miami run all over them, and they basically let Miami do whatever they wanted to them. Whereas in the past, in the run, Raheem Mostert was able to get into the end zone. It's the king. And Derrick Henry did not get that opportunity versus the Saints. I fully expect him to be the dominant force. So in DFS, try your best to maneuver your lineups and make it centered around Derrick Henry. Ramondre Stevenson versus the Miami Dolphins. Now, Miami did a lot to preserve or to protect against the pass in Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Will. But Austin Eckler over 100. Joshua Kelly almost 100 yards rushing. They had 3 touchdowns, I think, between the two of them as well. This is going to be a matchup for Ramondre Stevenson, 2-dog. He was overcoming an illness versus Philadelphia, where he wasn't great in the run. He was solid in the pass game, achieving over 50 yards receiving as well. I think this is a game where we see Ramondre really thrive. Breece Hall versus the Cowboys. I say this where Breece Hall looked absolutely unbelievable against the Buffalo Bills. He led the league by far and away in yards over expected. He's just a special guy. And with the idea that Zach Wilson's your quarterback, you're going to be relying a lot on the run game. So whether it's Dalvin, whether it's Breece, both of these guys are going to be solid plays. But I love Breece. I'm giving my stamp of approval. I was worried last week. He was a clean fantasy option. I am giving it the 100%. You ride it out the rest of the season. You put Breece Hall in your lineups no matter what. He is going to be fantasy relevant. And the last thing I want to mention, my sit of the week last week, he's going to be one of my main plays this week. Jamal Williams versus Carolina. Carolina let the Falcons do whatever they wanted on the ground. Tyler Algier was efficient. So was Bijan Robinson. I expect Jamal Williams to get back on track. Was extremely inefficient against the Titans, but that's a credit to the Titans, not an indictment on Jamal. I love Jamal this week.
I love those plays. The one name you mentioned that you liked is one name that I actually don't like. That's Dalvin Cook. Last week, or really coming into this year, everyone expected Breece to get eased in. First month, 6 weeks of the season, Dalvin Cook will be the guy. But from what I saw week 1 is that Breece is, I think he even shocked some of those guys on the Jets staff because he looked not as explosive as last year, but even Breece at 80% is one of the most explosive running backs in the league.
Amazing.
So I have no problem starting him because at any moment he could rip off an 80-yard touchdown. Dalvin Cook, on the other hand, doesn't have that same explosiveness anymore.
No doubt.
This Jets offense, they have the lowest implied point total of the week at around 15.5 points. This, even though I'm praying and hoping Zach is that guy, the chances are this offense isn't going to be great. And when you have an offense that isn't great, you really only need a couple things to be fantasy relevant. You either have to be super explosive like Breece Hall is, or you got to catch just a ton of passes like James Conner. I don't think Dalvin Cook really has a pathway to either of those. We know the explosiveness isn't quite there, and I don't think he's going to get a ton of work in the passing game. So now you're going up against the Dallas Cowboys defense, that top 3 in the NFL. What they just did to the Giants, everyone's laughing about it, 40-0, haha. But it was really one of the most dominating performances you were going to see between 2 NFL teams. I'm not just taking that as, the Giants offensive line, Andrew Thomas got hurt, this and that. The Jets offensive line, even though it's a good run unit, I still don't 100% trust them when it comes against this Dallas front. So I'm staying away from Dalvin Cook. And really going forward, unless it's a great matchup, which it's going to take some weeks with this Jets schedule. We know how brutal it is the first 6 weeks. I'm staying away from Dalvin Cook for the foreseeable future until we get a juicy matchup.
My thought process was the way that I saw the Giants run the football in that opening drive, that seems to be just off this one matchup, which was extremely dominating. That's the weakness of this Cowboys defense. Saquon was able to get whatever he wanted. He was extremely efficient early on in the game. Daniel Jones as well. I expect Breece Hall, who obviously is one of the most explosive running backs in the game, will be relied on heavily so long as Zach Wilson is your quarterback. And the same for Dalvin. I'm not saying that he's an RB1. I'm not saying he's an RB2. You drafted Dalvin as your RB3 or as a strong flex. That is exactly what I see him being, especially in this matchup. Dalvin and Breece, they're going to be on a split. Hopefully, it's more of a 60-40 than we saw last week. but he's going to have the opportunity. I'm with you, probably not much as a pass catcher, but regardless, he's going, especially in PPR leagues, he'll get his 2, 3, 4 receptions, and he's going to be able to have that opportunity to be a rusher. And against this Cowboys defensive line, where obviously they're going to get a ton of pressure in the rush game, in the run, with their run defense, I think that's where they'll have their opportunity.
Moving over to wide receiver, I'm going to go back to back with my start and sit.
Hold on, brother. We got to get our sit. Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Oh,
I was going to say we got to get our RB sits.
We did our sits, no? Oh, my bad. Man. I just did mine. You haven't done yours. My fault.
That's okay. My RB sit's going to be A.J. Dillon. Now, I say A.J. Dillon with the fact of Aaron Jones. It's not seeming as if he's going to match up against the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons really did a great job of defending Carolina. Miles Sanders was very inefficient, but unlimited opportunities because it was getting out of hand late in the game. But last week, A.J. Dillon versus the Bears, whose defense was horrendous, 13 attempts for 19 yards. He did get a little bit of work in the pass game, but extremely inefficient, where we saw Aaron Jones be 100% dominant in that game. I don't love A.J. Dillon. I get it. If you need him where you have Aaron Jones, you drafted A.J. Dillon as your backup handcuff, you probably are forced to play him as a flex, or you maybe have no other choice, and maybe that's your RB2. You're hoping that you have other wide receivers to play in the flex, but I don't love this matchup for him. The Falcons' defensive line is very strong. Grady Jarrett, one of the better interior linemen that there is. It's not a matchup that I love. So I would try and do my best to have another option that's not A.J. Dillon.
Yeah, we're gonna go over some injuries before we end the show. Definitely talk about Aaron Jones, but back-to-back days not practicing is not a good sign. Okay, now we'll move over to wide receivers. Like I said, I'll go back-to-back because it's the same game. I'm starting Amari Cooper. I'm sitting George Pickens. Start off with Amari Cooper, coming off a terrible week. He was drafted probably as your wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 3. 3 receptions for 37 yards and wide receiver 57 was not the start you were looking for. I'm sure people are a bit worried with Deshaun Watson, who didn't look the sharpest, but I do want to just, calm your nerves a little bit maybe, right? The weather was terrible. This was a game where even though it was 0-0 at the end of the first quarter and 10-0 at the end of the first half, it felt like the Browns were up like 21-0 the entire game. The Bengals were simply not able to do anything offensively. And because of that, the Browns really didn't have to press. It was mostly the Nick Chubb show. And when Deshaun Watson did get opportunity to throw the ball, more often than not, it was inaccurate. And I think I'm more than anything just going to put that up to the weather, because there was a few times where Amari Cooper was wide open and he was missing, not even Amari Cooper, but anyone on this Browns team was open and he was missing them, throwing the ball at their feet. On top of that, he got injured in this game, ended up playing less than 70% of snaps. Now he's going up against the Steelers team, who they're coming off an embarrassing loss. They're going to have some fight. They're going to have some heart. But I think Amari Cooper will be able to get advantage of the secondary. I'm not expecting the rain to have as big of a factor. I don't think it's any weather is really expected to happen in the Steelers game. So I think, unlike this first game against Cincinnati, where it felt like everything was going against Amari in this passing game, things should lighten up this upcoming week 2. And I am sitting George Pickens. I know a lot of people are probably excited because Deontay Johnson goes down. Not excited, but George Pickens gets the opportunity now. We don't want any injuries.
We know what you mean, man. We know what you mean.
Even though Deontay's calling himself day-to-day and other people are saying week to week, what I saw from the Browns defense, I'm not taking lightly. I don't think it was just this one-time thing where it's, the Bengals are just out of sorts. Burrow was injured, no preseason, no training camp. I really think this Browns defense could end up being a top 5 defense in the NFL this season. Their cornerback room is elite. Their defensive line, their pass rush is elite. And what I saw from that first week of that Steelers offense, I have absolutely no faith in Matt Canada to be able to put together a game plan to beat Jim Schwartz and this Cleveland Browns defense. George Pickens has the big play ability, so he could go and get a 50 or 60-yard touchdown. But overall, I think it's going to be a really ugly day for the Steelers.
Yeah, I think the Browns are going to be able to get a ton of pressure on this Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line. On top of that, you mentioned it already, the secondary is going to be amazing. Having Denzel Ward on Pickens, that's going to be the primary matchup. And even it doesn't matter if you get Greg Newsome on Pickens, that's still not a great matchup. Greg Newsome, one of the better young cornerbacks in this league. I will say this. I don't know if I love the Browns offense that's not named Nick Chubb. And I say that where I need to see it done before I'm fully confident. Now, I know a bunch of people drafted Amari Cooper with high draft capital because he wasn't a 1,000-yard receiver last season with Jacoby Brissett. You get Deshaun Watson, a full training camp. You're expecting him to give you some strong fantasy output. But 7 targets, I get that it was raining, three receptions, 37 yards. You're right. It should be a lot cleaner of a game. But it's one of those I need to see. I respect you giving your stamp. You're ready. You believe that it's going to happen. But I'm one of those that I'm holding off. I'm not feeling overly confident with the Browns until Deshaun shows me consistency. This is a great matchup for him to get on track. I'm with you. And, of course, Amari Cooper will be a recipient. But it's one of those for me that I need to wait and see. I get where you're coming from, but I got to wait and see. My wide receiver plays, I have a few of them. Want to give love to Nico Collins versus the Colts. 11 targets, 6 catches, 80 yards last week against the Baltimore Ravens, who is obviously a very firm defense. And with rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud, it's already very evident that he is his favorite target. I'm expecting that to continue. There's been a lot of Nico Collins hype going on for a few years now. It's finally coming into fruition. Shout out to my bro, Big Chucky. But I definitely like this play versus the Colts. We saw Calvin Ridley essentially being force-fed. He was dominant. Nico Collins isn't no Calvin Ridley, but there will be opportunity for Nico to thrive. That's going to be a very good game, in my opinion. You guys should definitely tune into that. Keenan versus Tennessee. That's another matchup that I love. Keenan Allen put up 76 last week against Miami. Tennessee secondary. We just saw Olave go for over 100. We saw Michael Thomas start to get comfortable with his first game back in a little bit. So against Tennessee, Keenan Allen should be able to do whatever he wants. Mike Evans last week was able to get into the end zone against a Vikings secondary that isn't great, going up against another secondary that isn't great in Chicago. We saw Romeo Doubs have 2 touchdowns. Mike Evans is just so far above and beyond the rest of these guys that the Packers have. And against the Bears, Baker Mayfield knows that he has a reliable option. And not just Chris Godwin, of course, but in Mike Evans. I love Mike Evans as a play because Mike Evans was one of those guys that went super late in your drafts because of Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield already showed very early on he's going to target Mike Evans, and Mike Evans is on a fuck you tour. He is going to be a monster this year. I'm excited for it, and I hope that he balls out because he deserves his money. Now, my sit this week, I have 2. One's going to be my sit who was last week. I'm doubling down this week, although he did have a touchdown. Shout out to Michael Pittman. He is a sit this week versus Houston, going up against Derek Stingley. Houston does have a laundry list of people on their injury report, but Jalen Petrie was on that, a strong member of the secondary, but Derek Stingley did a great job against Odell. Odell was visibly frustrated. He really couldn't get anything going. It's not a matchup that I love overly. And with the Houston's defense, I think that it's going to be a lot better than what a lot of people anticipated. This is a very good young defense. D'Amico Ryans is going to have this defensive unit 100% sound by the end of the season. I do firmly believe that. It's still not a great matchup. And my next sit's going to be Romeo Doubs versus Atlanta. AJ Terrell was amazing against Carolina. Of course, Jesse Bates had himself a great ball game, having 2 interceptions as well. This Atlanta defense, don't sleep on this unit. They did a lot to construct this defense, bringing in Jesse Bates, Calais Campbell. You traded for Jeff Okudah. The hope was that A.J. Terrell could get back. He saw 4 targets go his way, no completions, going up against Romeo Doubs and Jordan Love, who he had his moments. He looked solid at times. He also didn't. He had some errant throws that I'm sure that he wanted back. 55% completion percentage, but he did have one of the highest passer ratings this past weekend. So, you be the judge of that. Go ahead and sit down and watch the film. But Romeo Doubs is not a matchup that I love. He did get into the end zone twice, but this is not the best matchup. If you have Romeo Doubs, stash him. There's going to be better plays. If you're forced, you need a flex, you can throw him in there, but he's not one of those guys that I love this week.
Shout out to our brother John, who I see is in the chat. Unfortunately,
Mr.
we don't have the
Tortorelli.
clapping sounds. He's asking, who's the rookie tight end one this year? Kincaid, Musgrave, Laporta. He said Pat Fryermuth was snatched from his soul. I don't know what that means.
He's
I'm
saying
still
for fantasy he needs a guy and he doesn't have Fryermuth.
Gotcha. I'm still banking on Kincaid, first round pick, best offense out of all of these. But I think all three have a real chance to be the tight end one in terms of rookies. They're all going to get opportunity. We saw Musgrave. He had an opportunity to have an even bigger game because of the errant throw from Jordan Love. Laporta has been getting, number one reps. He played, I want to say, 67% of the snaps the first game. So I think really all three of those rookie tight ends are going to be viable options. It might take a little bit longer, second half of the year, till they really get going. But I would be happy with any of those three on my team.
I think Musgrove, excuse me. Yeah, I think Musgrove with Watson being out is reaping the benefits of that, because I think once we see Watson back in the lineup, it's going to primarily be that Watson, that Dobbs combination. But I'm with you. Musgrove definitely is a firm play. Mr. Laporta, that man, week one, already getting an opportunity in this offense that is in desperate need of another skill position player in the wide receiver tight end department that's not named Amon-Ra. Laporta seems to be that guy. Of course, we saw him get opportunity week one versus the Chiefs. I think that was a great start to his career. But Musgrove, understanding that right now with Watson and his availability uncertain, there's definitely room for him to be very fantasy relevant.
So what are we doing here with the tight ends? Are we giving one each? Are we combining on one?
Here's the thing. Before the show started, we had a mutual agreement that we would come to a consensus and sit one because the tight end landscape is so shitty. But then now, here we go. We get TJ Hockenson, who he is, of course, one of the better tight ends in the National Football League. That's fair. But he goes and he scores 2 touchdowns. Maybe now we can't fully shit on tight ends. But yeah, we were kind of hyping up these guys because we're scratching, we're clawing, we're begging for anything with these tight ends. But I think we did come to a consensus sit, and it's unfortunate. It's tragic because this man is generational. He is amazing. It's a shame that Arthur Smith hates fantasy football. Your sit has to be Kyle Pitts. You have no choice but to start him because you drafted him. I'm assuming you're in a tight end league, probably in like the 6th, 7th round. You thought, hey, 6th, 7th round, I'm getting Kyle Pitts.
What if you got one of the rookies later? What if you got Musgrave or Laporta or King? Are you starting those rookie tight? I think I'm starting Musgrave, Laporta over Kyle Pitts.
Laporta versus Seattle.
Too.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Kincaid versus the Raiders. That's beautiful. Musgrave versus Atlanta. That's not the best matchup. Understanding that there is opportunity to be had. Yeah. He did get some looks. That's the thing. So you do have to keep that in mind. But so long as Desmond Ridder is the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons, you fade Kyle Pitts, you fade Drake London. It's tragic, but it's the truth.
Until we're proven otherwise. I do have a tight end start that I like this week. Evan Ingram going up against Kansas City. When you don't have one of those top tier tight ends, the Andrews, the Kelseys, I'm looking for a guy who is either on a great offense, going up with a great matchup, or is getting an opportunity. Evan Ingram's kind of had the trifecta. He had the breakout year last year. With Trevor Lawrence, had 5 receptions last week, and he's going up against Kansas City. It's expected to be a high-scoring game, one of the higher over-unders of the week. So if you have Evan Ingram, I'm comfortably starting him over Kyle Pitts. It wouldn't surprise me if he's a top 5 tight end this week.
So you asked me a question, am I starting one of these rookies over a Kyle Pitts? Now, it'd be hard, understanding that Kyle Pitts has the talent, but Sam Laporta is my tight end start of the week going up against Seattle last week, where the landscape of tight end was so terrible. In a week where he only had 5 receptions and 39 yards, he was still tight end 8. Now, this week, who knows? It could be different. We already got off to a positive note with TJ Hockenson. Dallas Goedert still back-to-back weeks of kind of being a disappointment. He did have 6 receptions, so in PPR, that bodes well for you, but only for what, 26 yards, something along that line.
Not great.
So it's not a line that I love. But Sam Laporta going up against Seattle. Tyler Higbee was able to have himself a fantasy relevant day. I think Sam Laporta, with the opportunity that is being given to him early on with Jameson not being available to the Detroit Lions, someone's going to have to catch passes that's not named Amon-Ra. We saw Reynolds get involved in the pass game last week, having 80 yards, but that was really on a big chunk play. A lot of his yards did come. So I feel like Laporta, with how thin the tight end landscape is and how few guys there are, you feel overly comfortable starting. Sam Laporta's got to be my start of the week, and I'm giving him my stamp of approval.
I just see Bees' clutch, Logan Thomas or Kyle Pitts. I'm over here looking. I'm on Sleeper. Logan Thomas got 8 targets last week. He played 82% of snaps. Pitts, on the other hand, is around 60% snaps, 4 targets. I think I'm starting Pitts. I don't feel good about it, but give me the chance at an explosive play over this just pretty gross Washington offense.
And Laporta, I'm glad you brought up snap percentage. Laporta played 83% of snaps last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's amazing, especially as a rookie. They heard it all during camp. Sam Laporta is one of the standouts. They immediately showed that. I wish they showed the same love to Jameer that they've been showing Sam Laporta, but that's neither here nor there. Joel, let's get into the injuries. Talk to me.
Sir.
Who are we contemplating?
So I got Jeff Mueller up here. Follow him on Twitter. He's a PT. He's my injury guy. Whenever injuries happen, this is who I go to on Twitter. So I'm going through all of the players he's listed. He has some thoughts. Like I said, he's a PT, so has more knowledge than me at least. Austin Eckler, back-to-back days of not practicing, a suspected high ankle sprain. Eckler's probably going to be out. Back-to-back days of not practicing is not a good look. So I'm expecting him to be out. If he is, we're firing up Josh Kelly.
Against the Titans defensive line, it's not a great matchup, but if you were able to acquire Josh Kelly, if you're fortunate enough, I know that there were some people that threw the absolute bag at Josh Kelly. If you're listening, you know who I'm talking about. But overall, I don't love the matchup. But if you, again, are using him as a handcuff, I fear you have no choice.
Also, while we go through this, if anyone has questions, drop them in the chat. We'll try to get through them before we end the show.
Yes, sir.
DeAndre Hopkins, he did not practice, I do not think.
Ankle injury, right?
I'm trying to see. Yeah, didn't practice Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday. Doesn't look like he's going to play either. If you have those back-to-back days, it's usually not a good sign.
He is DeAndre Hopkins. He is DeAndre Hopkins. Does get that luxury of a veteran. We have seen it where Nuke has definitely missed a good portion of the week, still suited up. So he's one of those. Keep an eye on. We'll be tweeting about it. We'll let you know whether or not to get him in and out of your lineup.
Christian Watson doesn't look like he's playing back-to-back days of not practicing. Raheem Mostert, he didn't practice Wednesday, did practice today. He seems fine. Same thing with Kelsey. He's been limited back-to-back days. He's expected to be active. If he's active, of course, you play him. Mark Andrews, limited practice back-to-back days again. Going up against Cincinnati this week. This is a huge game, obviously, for Baltimore. I think he plays back-to-back limited practice. He was practicing some last week, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm leaning towards him playing. Darren Waller as well, back-to-back days with that hamstring injury. I'm expecting both tight ends to play. Are you?
I'm definitely believing that Waller will play. It's already come out that it said that he will be playing this Sunday. Andrews definitely is a little bit more worrisome. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I'm going to lean he does play, though.
Okay. And we'll get to all your questions after the injuries. Brandon Cooks, he's probably going to miss a couple weeks. He hasn't been practicing. He'll be out this week. Jerry Jeudy, full participant in practice. It's been 3.5 weeks since that hamstring injury. Sounds like he's going to play.
Are
you trusting him?
We're back, boy.
Week
you
one,
send
you're
him
putting
week
him in the
one.
lineup?
You send him out there. You send him out there versus that Commander secondary. I fear no man. You throw him out there because Russell Wilson needs a best friend. It's not going to be little Jordan Humphrey. Shout out to him. Caught a touchdown. It's not going to be Cortland Sutton. You pissed me off for the last time, Cortland. You did catch a touchdown, but you were underwhelming other than that. Get Jerry Jeudy out there. You put him in your lineup. You feel good about it because Russ needs someone, and that's going to be Jerry.
All right, a couple minor ones. Dalton Schultz, full participant. He's going to play. Curtis Samuel, limited but expected to play. And Zach Moss. Zach Moss is a sneaky start going up against a bad Houston Texans defense. He was full participant. He broke his arm a couple months ago, but he should be good to go. Aaron Jones did not practice back-to-back days. He is someone who has in the past not practiced, ends up playing, but it doesn't feel great, especially with the soft tissue injury with the hamstring. I lean towards him being out. Jeff Mueller also says he leans him being out. It wouldn't surprise me early on the season if the Packers just play it safe.
Yeah, you got to be
Um,
smart. Aaron Jones is your offense.
And that's pretty much it. Brees was limited, but he's expected to play. That's pretty much all the injuries. So let's go through these questions. Do we want to do the you want to pull up the what's it called?
Yeah, I could pop them up.
Yeah.
Here we go. First question comes from AJ Baines. Is Garrett Wilson also worth starting? Joel, this is a question for you, brother.
You start your studs. Garrett Wilson's upside, the top 5, the breakout that we all wanted, probably not going to happen. It's not a great matchup, but you drafted Garrett Wilson in the back of the second, early third at worst. I'm still starting him.
You have no choice. You have to start Garrett Wilson. Like I said on the last show, and I'll reiterate on every other show going on, you have to trust your guys sometimes.
Yep.
Next one, and this isn't a question. I just need to highlight the stupidity. Jordan Perigo says, man who supports Daniel Jones keeps calling Riddle horrible. Jones isn't much better, my guy. Do some soul searching. and by soul searching, I mean a quick Google search to understand that this statement is absolutely horrific. Moving on really quick. Thank you very much. Rob asks, how will Chris Jones to Casey return impact Travis Etienne's value on Sunday? Of course, Chris Jones is a game-changing defensive tackle, one of the best defensive tackles in the game. If you're not named Aaron Jones, there's a strong argument that Chris Jones could be number 2 on that list. So I think that you keep that in mind, but Travis Etienne, you have to play him. He's versatile, obviously, as a rusher and as a pass catcher. We did see Tank Bigsby get some opportunity. He did have his misfortunes early on in the game, but he recovered nicely. I still like Etienne, was able to get into the end zone against the Colts last week too. I think you fire him up, right?
Yeah, I think it does seem pretty big that Tank had a fumble, right, early on in the game.
Yeah, he did.
And Doug Peterson said, hey, we're still giving you the rock, got a touchdown the goal line. But yeah, you start Travis Etienne. Even if the rushing impact isn't huge, he still always has potential in the pass game.
Next question comes from Trevor Warren. Joshua Kelly or Dotson full PPR in the flex spot. Now, Dotson going up against
there.
That's a fact.
I like Dotson upside in full PPR.
He's going up against my Broncos, understanding that Damari Mathis, he was barbecue chicken last week for Jacoby Myers, and he made Jimmy G look a lot better than he probably should have. I think that repeating this matchup, Dotson, in my opinion, is better than Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers underrated, but I understand Jahan Dotson's talent, what he can be, his potential. Last week was the highest targeted receiver for this Washington Commanders offense. And over the last 2 seasons, he has out-targeted Terry McLaurin 25% to 21%. Jahan Dotson is going to get his fair share of looks, especially in this matchup. And I already mentioned I don't love Joshua Kelly against that Tennessee Titans defense.
And DB just reminded me in the comments that Tank Bigsby fumble was that really strange. He thought the play was dead. It wasn't dead. They popped it out. So probably not the biggest deal.
Next one comes from DB Too Easy. Says, what do you think about Titans receiving options this week? Treylon and Chig, especially with Hopkins potentially out.
Yeah, you definitely have to feel better than with Hopkins in the lineup. If there's ever a week you're going to be starting these guys, it's going to be the week without DeAndre Hopkins. So I think Treylon's probably a boomer bust wide receiver 3. Chig, probably you're expecting him to get more looks than he did last week, but still feels pretty boomer bust. It's not like Chig is like really ingrained in this passing game where he's guaranteed to get like 6-7 targets a game. But I think without Hopkins in this lineup, he should see some more looks.
I feel like this game script's going to be heavily reliant upon Derrick Henry and what he's able to do. I think that this is going to be a huge Derrick Henry game. For that being said, I don't think that Tennessee will rely on for a second week in a row after seeing how horrible Ryan Tannehill was against the Saints. I get this Chargers defense is nowhere near as good as the Saints, but regardless, I think you have to cater to your strengths. That is the run game. I don't love relying on one of these guys, but with the tight end position being as thin as it is, I feel like Chig is not a bad option going against this Chargers secondary. And then Treylon, if you're desperate at flex, especially with Hopkins out, but I feel as if with the respect that Hopkins has earned, I would not be surprised to see Hopkins play. But keep it in mind, obviously, we'll keep you guys notified. Next question comes from Emmanuel Brown. He asked, Trevor Lawrence big day in KC. I don't see why not.
Gotta feel
Jared
good about
Goff
it.
was able to be fantasy relevant. Didn't have the best game. I think it was 15, 16 fantasy points. Trevor Lawrence is Trevor Lawrence. You start him. You feel pretty comfortable about that.
Yep.
Next one comes from AJ Baines. Mike Evans or DJ Moore? I love Mike Evans this week. DJ Moore, this is one of those that I was high on DJ Moore prior to the season starting. I felt as if Justin and him would have a solid connection, but that's one of those wait and sees. Maybe the Packers secondary is really good, which it obviously is. Jair is elite, but Mike Evans, this matchup, especially going up against Chicago, I mean, that's all day.
Yep, give me Mike Evans. That's pretty easy for me too.
Next one comes from Alex Hurd. Josh Kelly or Miles Sanders? Eesh.
Who are the Panthers playing? Remind me.
Saints.
Don't love that.
Don't love either of these.
Yeah, I don't.
Josh Kelly, I
Kelly
guess.
or Miles Sanders.
He's in the better offense.
Yeah, I guess that's the tiebreaker. Yeah, give me Kelly in the better offense.
Next one comes from Trevor Warren. Denver's D, Colts D, Cardinals D. So Denver's going against Washington. Yep. Colts going against Houston. Cardinals going up against.
We're not doing
Giants.
the Cardinals.
No way.
We're not doing the It's probably Denver. Give me none of the matchup. All the matchups are good. They're going up against bad teams. I think Denver has probably the most talented defense out of these three.
I'm with you there. And Houston's offense, where obviously didn't put up the points. CJ Stroud didn't look terrible. I think that's going to be a great game. AJ Baines also asks, who does he believe that the best defense of the week will be?
Can you get the Cowboys?
Cowboys isn't crazy.
Against the Jets.
Oh yeah, no, that's obviously great.
I like the Giants this week going up against the Cardinals.
Definitely.
Honestly, every week just pencil it in. Whoever's going up against the Cardinals, put them in your lineup. But if you want some upside, go against those teams, those quarterbacks that are turnover prone. Zach Wilson, like I said, of course, what Dallas just did week 1, you're starting them no matter what. But teams that like Chicago that you're going up against where Fields can kind of get into ugly days. If you're looking for the upside, I'm looking at the opposing quarterback and who's going to turn the ball over the most.
Best defense of the week is going to probably be the Dallas Cowboys. It's just no slight to Zach Wilson. That's just what history has shown us. Sleeper, Browns against, not a sleeper really. Browns versus the Steelers, definitely one to keep an eye out on. Sleeper, Atlanta versus the Packers. The Packers had a very, very lenient performance week 1 against the Chicago Bears defense. That's arguably one of the worst in the league. Atlanta's defensive unit is a lot better, and I think that this is Jordan Love's true test. I think that this Atlanta Falcons defense is for real, man.
Sneaky?
That's one to that's a sneaky dark horse play, but definitely Cowboys has to be number 1.
Yes,
all right, and I think that's going to do it.
Super chats. We got 3 super chats.
Nice. Way to keep it on board, man. Shout out to our brother Santos. He's out of here early, but he always shows his love. Appreciate the donation, brother. Shout out to the Kill Shot donating $1.99. Love y'all. Had Swift on my bench, but had Hawk. All right, little silver lining. Having 30 points on your bench never ideal, but hey, man, we love you too, and we appreciate the donation. And last one comes from Kill Moose, donated $5 to Dehls. I got a wide receiver for you in college to look out for. Jamari Thrash out of Louisville. He's dead nice and a really good playmaker. Keep your eyes out on him.
All right, I'm going to take a look. Let's see. Last year, he's a 1, 2, 3. He's going into year 5. Put up 1,100 yards last year, though. I'll see what he's got.
Okay. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. We'll be back Monday live, every Monday, every Thursday after these games. We're coming to you live. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.